So I'm going to do a quick poll. Please answer one of the options. It really helps us in determining how our outreach is going with the Maricopa Community Colleges. So I'll go ahead and post this poll right now. Can you see that? Yeah, okay. Okay. Well, it's still going up, so there we go. All right, great. So I will go ahead and end this, and I would like to introduce our business analyst, Lou Farina, and he will introduce our guests.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Karen. Good morning, everybody. This is I'm Lou Farina. I'm with the SBDC, and welcome to our webinar this morning. Thank you for taking time out of your morning to join us. We hope it's going to be informative. We're going to talk about SBIRs and STTRs. So let me just start out by giving you an outline of what is going to, how we're going to proceed today. Our topics are going to be, the first is going to be startup capital landscape. I'm going to talk just a little bit about startup capital and how the SBIR program kind of fits in. Then I'm going to turn it over to Bob Mucci, who I'll introduce here in a second, from Apex, and he's going to give you an introduction to the SBIR STTR program, as well as the Apex Accelerator and the services he provides. I'm going to then turn it over to Jada Wendling, and she is from ACA. She's going to talk about some of the FAST grant initiatives and some of the other current events going on with regard to ACA and SBIRs. Then we're going to come back to myself, and we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about the commercialization importance in the section in the proposal. So that is our agenda for today. I'll just, this slide, we talk about fundraising. It's extremely challenging, as some of you may know, and those of you who have not attempted to raise funds as of yet, you will come to know. But the SBIR program from, sponsored by the U.S. government, is the nation's largest source of early stage high risk funding for startups and small businesses. And I'll probably defer to Bob on this one, but I think the total budget now is about $3 billion or so. So let me introduce myself. So Lou Farina, this is me. I'm an analyst here at the Maricopa SBDC. I specialize in what they call technology commercialization. That's how you monetize technology-based businesses. I come from the private sector, corporate ventures background, large-scale projects, but I've also served and been involved in the local community as an angel investor and a consultant. And I actually am a reviewer for the National Science Foundation on SBIRs. I will introduce here Bob Mucci. Bob is from our Apex Accelerator, formerly known as PTAC. For those of you who've been around a while, they've rebranded, renamed. I'll let Bob talk more about it, but he works for the Apex Accelerator. He's a subject matter expert in SBIRs and STTRs in our community, and he's also a no-fee service. He's assisted the University of Arizona, CEI over at Gateway, in applying, and others throughout the state in applying for a variety of SBIR solicitations. Next, we have Jada Wendling, and Jada is a venture development intern with the ACA, and she assists small businesses with grant programs to enhance economic growth. Her role now includes, very recently, the SBIR program. So those are three of us. Let me give you the 5-minute commercial for the SBDC and what we do. We are part of the national SBDC network. We are the Arizona state, and we operate with 10 different centers here in Arizona. So I'm in the Maricopa Center. There's one in Tucson. There's one in Flagstaff, Yuma, etc. There's 10 all around the state. So there's resources. Things that we do, and I keep pulling in this old slide that says disaster loan assistance at the top. I've now put it at the bottom because we did a lot of that for a while, but that's not our primary goal. We do a lot of lender readiness preparation. If you want an SBA loan, with that financial review, we have marketing resources. We can help you buy and sell and exit. We have some manufacturing resources, myself, technology commercialization. We've got export international trade, government contracting through Apex. There's a lot of subject matter that we can assist with. The majority of what we do is what we call counseling. So it's no fee, one-on-one business advising. And we work with our clients through all the different stages of the business, including, early starts, raising capital, growth, and even into exit. And we do training, these no-fee training resources. This webinar is a training under our training umbrella. We have done, we used to do these in person. Pandemic, we went to webinar. We're still at webinar. We hope to go back and do them in person or at least hybrid at some point. And then there's resources that we have here. The platforms we have, like a live plan platform, which will help you create your business plan. Now we've got market research with iBiz World. So there's a bunch of other tools and platforms we can provide at no fee. So that's the SBDC. And here I'm going to start with startup capital, and then we're going to transition to Bob, who is going to provide us an overview of the program. But startup capital, is really made up of, and here it talks about debt capital versus equity capital, right? And that's the majority of the capital for startup. And we are talking about a third source, actually, which is actually grant funding. And that although the SBIR program really helps certain companies with seed capital on a grant basis, the majority of companies don't start with grants, don't have that opportunity. So it's really debt or equity. Anyone who's raised money can tell you the first startup capital is the trickiest and most difficult. There's really a lot of competition for limited sources of financing. It's if you were a serial entrepreneur, and we hear these stories all the time about somebody who got $10 million investment on a slide deck they showed somebody at Starbucks, but that doesn't really happen in reality, at least the majority of the time, except if you're a serial entrepreneur. So if you've had a couple successful exits and you've made money for some venture capital firms, then, and you have this close network, then it's a lot easier to get funding. But most of us are doing this for the first time, even the second time or third time. But most of us don't experience the pain that goes with starting up a business and acquiring capital. Let me just talk a little bit about startup debt first. So, there are some loan programs for startups. But really the difference between equity and debt is risk. And lenders in general are very risk averse compared to an equity-based investor. So they're willing to take on less risk. So therefore, what they'll fund as far as startups go is does not really serve the entire market, of course. It's extremely difficult to get a bank loan for companies that don't have a financial track record. And when we say financial track record, most banks want to see at least 2 years of financials. A lot of folks we work with on the SBIRs are just forming their company. They're pre-revenue, pre a lot of things. So not necessarily bank loan ready. And lenders will look at a lot of different things, right? They'll look at your experience. There were, SBA programs require significant cash down payment. They'll see how mature your product is. First thing they'll ask is your personal credit score, because most loans, especially early stage loans, you're gonna have to secure it with personal credit, personal guarantee. Do you have collateral? Do you have a house? Do you have a building? Do you have anything, machinery? Have you written a good business plan? Do you have industry sector appetite? What do they want? Bankers work on a portfolio basis, and we really don't know what their portfolio looks like at any one point in time. And so they may be heavy on tech firms, light on restaurants, and they may be looking for restaurants, and that's just their appetite at the time. So there's a lot that goes into it. It's available, but again, it is not really where we send people who are starting to raise early stage capital. There's kind of a progression to equity investment, or early stage investment, I should say. And we joke that who is the first person into your invested in your business? It's yourself. And then who's the second in? It's yourself, right? So note here is, the point is, you need to be able to invest in your business yourself to the extent that it's significant to your means. So not everybody has the same means. I'll tell you, if you have a very somebody has a lot of resources and they invest $10,000 or $20,000 into a business, and that's really just a European vacation for them. It may not really have the same meaning as somebody who has put 5,000 into their business but is working 2 jobs to try to keep things afloat, right? So we use this term skin in the game. How much skin do you have in? So that's important. It's an important point. SBIRs don't require people have invested in themselves. That's kind of one of the nice things, actually. Everybody else kind of does. So after you invest yourself, typically you can go to a friends and family round, which are people that know and love you. There are some public sources, maybe some city funding, if it's available. Who knows? There's crowdfunding. There's accelerators, which are different than incubators, that will maybe provide some capital in addition to a curriculum and a program. And taking some equity in your company. And then there's grants and SBIRs, and these are kind of all the early stage things that you will experience. One of the things I will say is, while we're talking, and I didn't say this initially, I'm sorry, is if you have questions, let's try to hold them till the end of each section. And I'll, when I'm finished with my section, I'll ask for questions, and then put them in your chat, and then we'll have Karen monitor the chat. Karen, and just let us know if we can answer some questions. So thank you. So going back to your pre-seed, seed sources, there are these early sources, and only really after you've exploited these sources, then you can really start to talk to angel investors, or maybe even local venture funds. Okay. If you're not put any money in yourself, and you don't really have your friends and family in, or you've not gotten any significant crowdfunding or anything, it's really going to be hard to have a conversation with angel investors or local investors. So that's really important. And typically after angel investors or local venture funds, you may have corporate or venture capital. And those are, you're usually, your risk profile is a little bit lower. Your capital requirements are a little bit higher. But again, you can't necessarily start here. You've got to kind of work from the front to the back. Typically most venture capitalists will look for an angel investment as validation, to see if there's any local angels in your community. And then you start talking about things like IPO and private equity. Well, that's way out of the, way out, not available to most. Most don't need it. Most never get there. And so I just put it down there, but it's much, much later than most folks that we work with have to worry about. So why do investors like SBIRs? Okay, so you saw from that first chart, it's early capital injection, right? And Bob will talk to you about the amounts, a couple $100,000 to $1 million, $1.5 million early. And it's non-dilutive, right? This is really important, especially when you talk to other investors. Nobody's taking additional ownership. The government is not taking a piece of your company. It is a pure grant or a contract for research. So non-dilutive capital. There is a level of validation that goes on with SBIRs, and we'll talk about it. They're very competitive, and they go through judging. I judge, I evaluate, and there's scientific vetting. They'll bring in some domain experts, and there's commercialization vetting. And so if you get through and you get an SBIR, you've gone through a series of vetting activities. And so there's a level of validation that is good to have as you move forward and you maybe start to talk to other investors. Why investors really like it? Of course, there's no dilutive capital, as we mentioned, but it also de-risks the investment, right? You know, the earlier you are, the more risky you are. If you've got technology that needs to be proved out or needs to be prototyped, if you can do that without giving away any of your company or taking on significant debt, you know, by the time an investor sees it, he or she sees a lot less risk. That's important. So that the one caveat I will tell you though, I mean, these are, you know, SBIRs and STTRs are a really good program, but simply receiving a grant doesn't mean the company is a good investment. So it kind of goes both ways. I mean, just because you receive these grants and you've had this level of validation, it's not the level of validation that investors will put you through. Okay, so there's a whole nother level of validation that will go on as you work with investors. So money's just not going to rain down on you because you've got an SBIR. It's good, it's important, but again, there's a lot more that needs to happen. And on the other hand, I will tell you, and it's not on this slide, but there are a lot of companies I work with that don't get SBIRs. They may apply for an SBIR and not get it, but you know what? They're still good businesses, and there's maybe some other ways to fund them, and they get off the ground. So this level of validation, just because maybe you're not accepted by the agency, does not necessarily mean it's a bad business idea. And I would encourage you to work with an SBDC counselor or other mentors to help you work through that. So I will now turn it over to Bob Mucci from the Apex Accelerator. He's going to take us through the program itself, but I did see some questions. I have a hard time on my screen. Karen, anything that we need to answer?
Yes, asking for funding, does that not require a type of legal document to raise capital?
It does. It does require a legal document to raise capital. There are different legal documents. I don't want to get into it too much. We have another series on angel investing and some of the other options, but yes, you will need some kind of legal document.
And just so you know, I have enabled chat. It might be a little bit easier to put your comments and questions in the chat. So we will do that going forward. Sorry about that.
So anything else? Nothing else?
Mm-mm.
Okay, thank you, Karen. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. Bob, you're up.
Okay, so let me go ahead and do my share screen. And
I will turn off my camera.
Slideshow. See here from the beginning. Okay. A really quick also caveat in that question that was asked about a legal document. One of the things that you are required to do for an SBIR is you do need to be a business, either a C Corp, S Corp, sole proprietor, or an LLC. So you actually do need to be a business to apply for SBIR. There's a picture of me when I was young and handsome, which I'm neither anymore. We used to be called PTAC, and we've been taken over by the Office of Small Business Programs. So now we're Arizona Apex Accelerated. So ignore the little Arizona PTAC thing in the bottom, although, you know, sometimes we still are referred to by PTAC. And I won't go through much of what Lou said. You know, I've been doing SBIR counseling work for probably about the last 5 or 6 years. Prior to that, I was also an SBDC counselor located down here in Cochise College. And I'm headquartered down in the southern part of the state, but I actually cover the whole state for SBIR, excuse me, applicants. So it doesn't matter where you're at. You know, if you're going to be doing SBIR work and you come to Arizona Apex Accelerators, you're going to end up talking to me. Now, the other thing that I'm going to do is I can only give you a 50,000, you know, level review of what SBIRs are, because they are complicated and each agency has their own SBIR application protocols and way of doing business. But like I said prior, you know, like I said, you have to be a business. You have to have a tax identification number, an EIN number. You need to be registered in what's called sam.gov, and you need to also be registered with the SBIR at the sbir.gov business registration page. So there's a large number of administrative things that an applicant needs to do before they even get to the point of making an application. So what is SBIR and what is STTR? Well, SBIR stands for Small Business Innovator Research. And the thing about SBIRs is that they are designed to stimulate technology innovation by investing in research and development. They may or may not require a business to be involved with an institution of higher education. And SBIRs are agency specific. Very important that you understand that every single agency has their own way of doing business and their own SBIR programs. Now you contrast that with STTRs. STTRs are small business technology transfer. And what that means is that you're applying essentially for a different type of funding source. STTRs are awards that are made to businesses that pursue technology innovation through cooperative research with a nonprofit scientific and educational research institution. And let me go back here for a quick second. And the thing that you have to understand is that the funding for SBIRs is a much bigger pool than the funding for STTRs. So one of the things that an applicant needs to look at is whether you're going to apply for an SBIR or an STTR, understanding that STTRs is a smaller pot. The other thing that you need to understand is that when you're applying for either an SBIR or an STTR, you need to look at a sponsoring agency, and you need to look at the solicitations. You need to look at where SBIRs and STTRs are advertised, because they come out over specific periods of time and they are advertised in different areas. Solicitations for SBIRs and STTRs can be located in sam.gov or in grants.gov. They can also be located in what we call BAAs, broad agency announcements. And BAAs are traditionally sort of focused on the Department of Defense. The other thing about BAAs is you can also find BAAs in what's called the DSIP portal, the defense portal, where they list all of the SBIRs and STTRs that are related to DoD. I'm going to talk a little bit more about topic specific, but one of the other things that you need to understand is that there are two agencies that have open topics, and we'll discuss those in a sec. But open topics can also be listed in grants.gov, DSIP portals, or on sam.gov. So, you know, you got to kind of understand where you're going to be looking for an SBIR topic or subject that you might want to apply for. There is a virtual cornucopia of agencies that offer SBIRs and STTRs. And you can just see, you know, up here, these are the agencies that really offer these particular kinds of programs. The 95-pound gorilla in the mix is the Department of Defense. They offer the most dollars and the largest number of SBIRs and STTRs. That's followed usually by the National Science Foundation, the National Institute of Health, and then after that, you have other agencies, but they have smaller pots of money that they're dealing with. The other thing is requests for SBIR applications really can be problem or topic specific or broad in nature. And I'm going to talk about that specifically in a second, but it depends on the agency and their requirements. Topic areas. There are two agencies that have what really I call open topic areas. One is the National Science Foundation. And And here's the difference. Most agencies that do SBIRs or STTRs will list a specific topic that they're looking for applications for. And I often get businesses that come to me with really great ideas and they want to apply for an SBIR. But the problem is they don't fit a specific topic. For instance, DoD may be looking for, a way of solving incoming hypersonic missiles. Well, if you're not dealing with that particular topic, you can't apply. So you have to understand how SBIRs and STTRs work. Most are very topic specific, with the exception of NSF. Now, NSF has these very broad topic areas that you see here. And what you would do is you would say, okay, I have a topic that deals with artificial intelligence. So you go to the National Science Foundation website, click on their broad topic area for artificial intelligence, and it would bring up subtopic areas. And you have to see if you fit into the subtopic areas. And if you do, then what you do is you send to them a project pitch, and they'll either like what you're proposing and extend to you an invitation for a full application, or they'll say no, it really doesn't fit into our broad topic areas. The other agency that has very broad topic areas, and is called open topic, is the Air Force. They have a program called Air Force Works. And Air Force Works has basically said, look, we don't know what you have. And you may have something that is of real interest to us. So what we want you to do is we want you to make a project pitch. And if we like what your project pitch is, we'll extend to you an invitation, for phase 1 application. So you have to understand, you may have a great idea, you may have a great, theory or a great product that you want to design, but if you don't fit a topic area, you've got to look at Air Force Works or NSF for broad topics. How do you apply? Well, the best thing I can tell you here is, boy, howdy. Every single agency has their own application process. Some agencies use grants.gov. DoD uses the DSIP portal. DOE has their own application portal. NSF has their own way of applying, and they make it, it would be great if they all had the same application process, but they don't. And so you really need to understand the application process. And the other thing is that these application processes are covered in the solicitations. So applying for an SBIR can be a little bit of a daunting process, but one of the things that I do with my clients is I assist them in going through the application process and understanding how to apply. Some of these application processes I've covered below, but you really need to read the SBIR solicitation. For instance, National Science Foundation requires a project pitch. And like I said, if they like you, they'll send you an invitation for a full application. Air Force Works requires a project pitch and a slide deck. That's how you apply initially to them. And again, if they like, your application, they'll actually give you a phase 1 award. DOA may require a concept paper or a project pitch. Same thing. If they like your concept paper or a project pitch, they're going to extend to you an invitation for a full application. National Institute of Health may require a white paper to be submitted to a topic manager. And that would be covered in that particular solicitation. Or you can just make an application. But you got to read the solicitation to find out what they're looking for. DoD and all others, the initial requirements will be in a solicitation. Okay. This is important. We have an old saying, it grew up on the East Coast: tide and time, wait for no man. And it's important that you start your application months and months before it's actually due. I've heard, and I believe it to be true, the average time to draft a proposal for an SBIR or an STTR is between 200 and to 300 hours worth of work. I mean, this is a lot of work, and you should not think that you can start your application a month before it's due, because it's just not going to work. I mean, you're not going to be able to meet the requirements, and you actually won't produce an application that will be a very good application. I mean, I've seen it done, but I don't encourage it. Plan ahead, plan way ahead. Due dates. Due dates for application are due dates, and due dates seem, your time compresses as you start getting closer to the due date. Due dates are closer than they appear. So, if you're looking at turning an application for an SBIR that's due in 2 months, you've got an outside chance of, making that due date. But I recommend that people that apply for SBIR start 3 to 4 months minimum in advance. So you're going to apply for an SBIR. What do you do next? You read the solicitation, then you read the solicitation, then you read the solicitation again. And what I didn't put in here is print the solicitation. Produce a hard copy and sit down in a room where nobody's bothering you with the yellow magic marker and start going through and highlighting the important parts of the solicitation. Because the other thing is, the devil is in the details. I had one client that started to put together a really very detailed solicitation, and I pointed out to him that he didn't meet a key part of the solicitation that required, him to have a device that could hover in the air, and his device didn't do that. So it was a waste of time for him to continue down that road. So you really need to read the solicitations, and I will read them with you and discuss the solicitation with you, to see if you really are qualified. The other thing that you really need to understand about SBIRs and STTRs is this is a competition. You are competing with thousands of applicants. The last Air Force Works SBIR that I helped a client with for phase 1 had 1,700 applicants. Out of that 1,700 applicants, they awarded awarded 750 phase 1 applicants, and out of that phase 1 application, they awarded 110 phase 2 applications. So you got to understand, you're competing against a lot of folks that are out there, and your application is going to be subject to a peer review. It's basically your peers that are going to be reviewing what you're applying for and give you basically a thumb up or a thumb down. And you may have a great idea, but then again, so does every applicant. So you got to look at, how you distinguish yourself from other applicants and, how you meet the requirements of that solicitation. Like I said, every agency has its own evaluation criteria. NSF has a really very specific criteria that they look at when they're reviewing your application. What they want to know is what are you proposing involving significant research and development technology, because NSF focuses on R&D. Is your innovation unique and defensible? Do you have an aggressive commercialization plan? And do you have significant understanding of the market and the customer? And I want to stop here for a second. I want to point out that the purpose of SBIRs and STTRs is to fund early startup businesses that will then produce or design or develop something that will then go on to become a fully functional business that will sell either to the Department of Defense or sell commercially, depending upon, who is the funding agency. So they're not giving you money just to do R&D. They may be giving you money to do R&D, but the whole point of SBIRs and STTRs is to get a company to the point where they are commercially viable company. Like I said, DoD is topic specific, but they want to know if there's a dual use to your technology. They want to know, how does it benefit the Department of Defense, but is there a commercial use that it can be used for? And it's very important that you deal with that question of dual use. The National Institute of Health is very, very heavily weighted towards funding entities that are working with research institutions. They will fund SBIRs and STT. Well, they'll fund SBIRs if you're not related to a research institution, but you have a much better chance of being successful if you are working with a research institution, and individual solicitations may require you to do so, either as part of the SBIR or as part of an STTR, which really does require you to be working with a research institution. Let's talk about how the funding and the awards work. So the thing about SBIRs is usually what happens is you have a phase 1 proof of concept, POC. And what the funding agency is looking for is that what you're doing is innovative, not evolutionary. They will not fund an applicant that is building on something that has already been out there and designed. In other words, they're not going to fund you if you can take a widget and make your widget, better. So what they're looking for is they're looking for things that are innovative and that are early in the early design stage. They are looking at funding entities where there's a high degree of risk or failure because you are pushing beyond present technology. They are going to fund you if you're working on a whole new product, technology, or process. And the other thing too is that phase 1 funding is usually very short. It's for 6 months up to a year. That's their funding source. What is not acceptable for SBIRs are system studies, market research, commercial development of existing products or concepts, or evolution of existing products or applications. Phase 1 funding, I would call this, sort of small dollars. It can be anywhere from 150,000 up to, depending on the agency, $250,000. But it is where, your small dollars are, it's to develop your proof of concept. Let's see if we can go down here. There we go. So now what? So you get phase 1 funding. Well, like I said, holy guacamole, you think that, it works. Guess what? You have to apply again for phase 2. You don't automatically get phase 2 funding if you get phase 1 funding. And phase 2 funding is for grantees to take the POC and then work on making it commercially available. It's for how do you build and manufacture your magic nuclear blaster decoder ring that can make ice and brew coffee at the same time. And the other thing is, it's a lot more money. Phase 2 funding can be anywhere from $750,000 up to 1.7 million, sometimes 2.5 million. I mean, it's where the larger awards are. But you have to get a phase 1 funding to get phase 2 funding, with the following exception. Sometimes agencies will do what they call direct to phase 2. And that's where you've already, proven your concept. And now you want to look for getting phase 2 funding to start looking at making your concept commercially available. Phase 2 funding is very difficult to get. There's a lot of competition for phase 2 funding. And it's a lot smaller, the number of businesses that get funded for phase 2. So, there is a way of going direct to phase 2, but it's pretty complicated and the chances of success are a lot smaller. Just to give you an idea too of what the chances are of success, I've seen that the National Science Foundation success rate for SBIR applicants is about 10%. So 90% of the people that apply do not get funded. So that's why, I encourage people to start early. Don't think you're going to do this, overnight. How do you get help? Well, there is a lot of help that's out there. There's a lot of online tutorials. There are, to date, 55 courses that are out there that are agency overviews, program basics, information about data rights, information about IP protection. Over on the right, you can see, how do I find an appropriate topic? Now, this is on the SBIR website. So there's a lot of tutorials that are out there. The Department of Energy is contracted with a private company called Don Treader, and Don Treader helps DOE, Department of Energy applicants, find topics, put together a topic, helps them write their SBIRs, helps them understand all of the things they need to know to apply for SBIRs or STTRs. So there's a lot of tutorials out there, and you got to do your homework. Do your homework early, understand the process, understand how to apply, understand what, the topic is. Locally, there is a fairly significant amount of help that's available to you. There is help at, the SBIR.gov website, SBC advisors, Lou, myself, Apex, advisors, Arizona Commerce Authority. There are consultants out there that do SBIR work for a fee. We have 2 that are located here in Arizona that are really very good. The other thing too is that you can always try calling and finding. You can find who has been awarded an SBIR or an STTR, and you can make a call and ask, them, how did they go about the process? What did they do to apply for their SBIRs? What made them winners? Sometimes they're really very forthcoming. Sometimes they're not, but it's one of those things where I encourage you to go to meetings where there may be presenters who have been awarded SBIRs. I know the University of Arizona Center for Innovation does this, on a yearly basis. So you may want to, go to school on the people who have won SBIRs. Now, one of the things I want to tell you is that I do not write SBIRs to my clients. It's not something that I do. What I do is I review your application. I make sure that you understand how to apply. I make sure that you've hit the high points, and we'll go through the solicitation point by point so you understand how to write your own solicitation. Consultants will write for a fee. So, it depends on how much money you have and, the route that you want to go down in making your application. That's really all I have. And like I said, this is a 50,000, elevation view of complicated process. And to do a SBIR review on NIH, I would have to do just that, review. So I'm trying to give you a broad perspective on what it is, you have to do to apply for SBIRs, CTRs. So do we have questions?
I think we do, Bob. Karen?
We do, Bob. Let me start. And some of them may actually be residual questions from Lou's presentation, but should I be requesting a signed NDA before asking for funding in the pre-seed stages?
Want me to take that one, Bob?
Yeah, go ahead, Lou.
Yeah, no. And I'm going to give the short answer is no. And the longer answer is in your materials that you're using for investment, don't put anything that's proprietary. So there's a fine line. Work with somebody who can help you draw that line.
The other thing too is that in solicitations for SBIRs, there will be language about, you putting in that, what you are submitting is proprietary and not to be disclosed to the general public. Although for some SBIRs, you have to do an abstract, and that abstract is subject to public notice. But there is no federal agency that is going to sign an NDA. Okay.
Okay, next question. Does anyone have experience with having AI draft legal documents now that Chat GPT has access to Wolfram Alpha?
Well, that's a good question. You could pull before Chat GPT, you could pull legal documents off the web. There are, you can get safe agreements, you get, convertible note agreements. They don't do you any good unless you understand it. So yeah, you could have Chat GPT draft something for you, but it's a starting point, and I would certainly seek representation with an attorney to review those documents. You got to know what's in there. You got to know what you're signing up to. It's kind of like a marriage. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add to that.
Okay. Next question, please elaborate on being affiliated with an institution of higher education.
I think that's you, Bob.
Yeah, so being affiliated with an institute of higher education usually relates to STTRs, although it can also be a requirement for an SBIR. And what it means is that you have a formal agreement that an institute of higher education, a university, a college, something that is, registered as an institute of higher education, is part of your application process. For instance, in STTRs, there is a requirement that your university do 49% of the work. So it's not just that they've signed on board and that, yeah, they really like you. You have to have a formal agreement with them as part of the application process, because that's the requirement of the STTR. And you look, when you read your solicitation, the required documents are going to be in that solicitation, not that they've agreed to help you. I mean, it's a really very formal agreement, and that's part of your application. And I hope that answers. That's a short answer to a really very complicated question. I hope that helps you out.
Okay, and then someone said, I saw on at least 2 websites that there were no SBIR opportunities. Is that related to the current budget crisis?
The answer to that is that not all of the agencies offer SBIRs all of the time. I mean, they may not get the funding, they may not have, there may not, and it may also be that, you're in a window where there is no opportunity that's listed. So I would need to know what agencies you're looking at, but as a rule, agencies are required to offer SBIR funding as part of their agency funding. I mean, there's a specific requirement from Congress that a certain amount of money that goes to, okay, and I'll answer that question in a sec. Certain amount of money that goes to the agency has to go to SBIR. Now, USDA is in between funding. They have just gone through an SBIR funding cycle, and their new funding cycle is not open yet. Same thing with EPA. So there's a reason why there's nothing that's available right now. And you would have to look at the website to see when the next funding cycle is going to be open.
Okay, I think that gets it.
Okay.
Okay, I think Jada, would you like to share your slides?
Yep.
And also, I'm going to stay online too, in case any other questions come up. So I'll be around until the end.
Okay.
Perfect. All right, Bob, could you unshare your screen?
Yep.
Perfect, thank you.
Here we go.
All right. Perfect. My name is Jada. I am the Venture Development Intern with the Arizona Commerce Authority. I've been in this position for about 6 months now, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the FAST Grant and other initiatives we have here at the Arizona Commerce Authority that can help with SBIR and SCTR funding opportunities. To begin, I just want to recognize that Arizona Commerce Authority was chosen by the Small Business Administration to be Arizona's administrators of the FAST program, which moves us here to what exactly is FAST. FAST is the Federal and State Technology Partnership Program, and it's designed to support small business programs and projects that advance innovation. So essentially, it's the early stages of SBIR and SCTR, a way that can help fund and help you get prepared to submit an SBIR and SCTR later on. There are 3 different branches of the FAST program. The first one being outreach, the second being financial support, and the third being technical assistance. I'm going to focus for a moment here on outreach. There are a number of events that happen throughout the year that could be very helpful, and we do so with several different agencies. I'm going to mention just a few here that we have coming up. In June, on June 27th, there's the E-Mobility and Clean Energy Summit that will be happening. In this, we have one of the DOE agency experts will be at this to help talk about funding opportunities in the DOE and talk about this a little bit more in detail. And then in July, we have the Aerospace, Aviation, Defense and Manufacturing Conference that really focuses on SBIR and SCTR specific to NASA and the DoD. Next, financial support. There are several different grant programs we offer at the Arizona Commerce Authority that can help to further your application for SBIR and SCTR. The most important being the FAST program grant. The FAST grant is $3,000 to help with things such as grant writing, incubator programs, research and development, space at core facilities, all those things. And it actually opened round 6 opened May 15th and will close July 10th. This program mirrors the eligibility requirements, which I'll get into in a little bit, pretty similarly to SBIR and SCTR programs. We essentially want you to use this funding to help further your phase 1 or phase 2 applications. Another financial opportunity we have here is the Tech Connect grant. Once a year, we help fund several companies to go to the Tech Connect conference in Washington, D.C. And Tech Connect is the biggest SBIR SCTR conference in the US. There is a lot of support for different agencies and just a lot of connections and networking that can be done at this conference. So that application just closed and will open again in January 2024 for next year's Tech Connect conference in Washington, D.C. And the last one, while not directly connected to the FAST program, can help with SBIR and SCTRs, and that is our Advanced Manufacturing Facilities Grant, which supplements some of the costs of working in core facilities, specifically at Arizona State University. And now we're going to move on a little bit. What are the eligibility requirements for the FAST grant program here at the ACA? Now, I do want to mention we typically open this 3 times a year, and there are 18 spots for FAST grant. Again, they're $3,000. The eligibility requirements, they mirror very closely what SBIR and SCTR requirements would be, and that is because we want to make sure that you are prepared for an SBIR SCTR and know what those are when you're receiving a FAST grant. So firstly, the company must be for-profit, US owned and operated, and have under 500 people. The work must be done in the United States, and the focus of the FAST grant is really working on research and development, really advancing your SBIR, STTR applications or projects. FAST grant is not for purchasing equipment or commercializing your technology. And the really cool thing about the FAST grant is that the small business is always going to be the applicant and the awardee. FAST grant is not for large businesses. It is not for companies that have already commercialized a product. It is really for people who are going into the SBIR and STTR with a product and need more help furthering their application. Now, moving on to the technical side of our grant, we at the ACA have a lot of connections with the public universities, Arizona State, University of Arizona, and Northern Arizona University, which have a number of core facilities in all fields of research that can help further research and development in whatever proposal or project that you're looking at. Some of the tools and equipment that you could find at these places are electron microscopes, sample prep equipment, clean rooms, secure research environments, and a whole bunch more. We do have connections at all these universities. If you're interested, you can reach out to us and we can get you connected to the right equipment, to the right people who can help you at any of these universities to work on research and development at these core facilities. I do also want to mention for people that have won in SBIR or STTR, some of the universities offer nonprofit rates, which will significantly decrease the amount of money you'll have to be spending at these core facilities to use their equipment. And for those of you who maybe have not won the award, the Advanced Manufacturing Facilities Grant is just another resource we have to help with the cost of core facilities. It is a we match it 50%. We pay 50%, you pay 50% of what core facilities you're using, because we know that they can be costly, and there are options that can help support your monetary contributions to core facilities. Lastly, the ACA does a lot to help early stages of SBIR and STTR kind of just investment of what you're looking in. So in addition to the FAST grant, the Tech Connect grant, and the Advanced Manufacturing Facilities grant, the ACA has access to consultants. We can put you in touch with them, or you can also just speak to us with a one-on-one consultation about SBIR and STTR, however you'd like. We have more information about eligibility requirements for all of our grants. We have access to the FAST and Tech Connect grant applications on our website, and more access to past webinars and workshops, as well as upcoming events. And we have much more. If you use that little QR code on the screen right there, it will take you directly to the page that you can access the most resources at the ACA website. And then here is my email. Thank you very much. And I'll pass it back to Lou.
Okay. Hey, thank you, Jada. That was terrific. There's, lots of good resources available here in the state. We've heard about SBDC, you've heard about Apex, and, ACA has got that FAST grant program as well as some expertise. And we're all just here to trying to assist you guys to move forward to take advantage of this program. So before I get into the commercialization section, I want to check with Karen to see if there's any more questions.
There's one more question. Would you suggest any other agencies related to farming and food sales?
Well, from the standpoint of SBIRs, you're not going to find an SBIR that is going to fund farming sales. And I would have to know specifically, what kind of topic, you're proposing an SBIR for, because if you're proposing something that's new and innovative, there may be the potential to apply to the National Science Foundation. So, that's kind of my answer. I really don't know how to answer you unless, I know the specifics of what it is you're proposing.
Thank you, Bob.
Let's see if he puts in the Q&A or in the chat maybe he can reach out to you specifically.
Sure, be
Would
happy
you be
to.
okay, Bob? Okay, perfect.
Okay, so we're going to move on. The last section here, we're doing a little time checks. I got about 11:02. I think we're scheduled to go to 11:30. I think this will take maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes. And then we can wrap up with any additional questions. So I want to just drill into the commercialization aspect of SBIRs a little bit, because it's an important and sometimes forgotten topic. You know, and Bob did a really good job of emphasizing, and I'm going to re-emphasize that the granting agencies are granting an SBIR, which is a different type of grant / contract than an R&D contract. They're awarding it to a business. So a business is more than just establishing an LLC. It's, you know, a business is someone who is going to be able to provide these products on a commercial basis. And therefore you have to look, feel, and act like a business. Now, realizing you're early and realizing you haven't written a business plan probably yet, maybe you have, they're going to ask you to start to think about it as a business, and there are going to be some sections you're going to have to address. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So I use the term commercialization plan pretty broadly. If you look at the other, again, Bob gave you the cornucopia of 11 different agencies who all kind of do this a little differently. You'll see things like commercialization strategy, commercial opportunity, potential post-application. I saw one the other day. It was EPA, I think. It was what's next or something next. You know, it was very generic, but it was their commercialization section. So they all have different kind of requirements, but I'm going to talk about some common themes. I mean, there's really a common theme around, you know, starting a business, especially an early stage technology business, and that's what I will address. I want to just go back and emphasize a little bit. And Bob he talked a little bit about it, but a dual purpose. Now, dual purpose is important because half, and the big one, DoD, but about half of the other agencies, I think 5 or 6, are actually contracting agencies that could potentially give you what we call a phase 3 contract, government contract for procurement for your product. The others don't. Now, the ones that do, the DoD in particular and NASA, they, you know, they're looking for their solution primarily, right? And they're going to write a pretty targeted solicitation to a problem that they have that they want you to solve. But there's a benefit to them for commercial applications. These are applications of the technology that are outside of the DoD necessarily as a customer, right? So why do they benefit and why do they like this? Well, you think about it, it helps spread the cost burden over the entire enterprise, right? So they're not funding, or they're not taking the risk of a single being a single customer. Ability to more successfully attract private capital is an important element. Commercial customers will, you know, a lot of investors will understand the commercial customers very well and be willing to invest if they don't necessarily have a commitment from the DoD at the time. And then again, from a cost perspective, there's lower unit pricing, right? You've got volume and supply efficiencies. So let's just say supply chain, not supply change. I apologize for the typo, but you know, right? If you're running similar technology in different products, you're going to get some cost efficiencies. And so when they buy their product, theoretically, it could cost less than if you didn't have other customers and another customer base. So that's important. That's an important piece. But let's step back again and talk about what a commercialization plan is. What, you know, why are they asking you to write this? What are they trying to figure out? It really gauges the economic potential of this, I'm going to call it innovation. And you know, what does that mean? Like, you know, how many people can affect? How many people can it employ? How, you know, what impact can it have on society? This is what they're thinking about, and can it do it in a significant way? you know, the plan itself, it's your opportunity to describe that strategy that will help you discuss how to generate revenue from the proposed innovation, right? So, I mean, it's pretty simple, but your revenue is important. This is your opportunity to talk about, as a business, how we're going to generate revenue. The roadmap for your future conveys how you generate profits from your innovation also, right? What, you know, what that future looks like and how you're going to generate profits. It really starts to be the genesis of a business plan. And it starts to look a little bit like an investor pitch. They're going to ask you maybe much of the same thing. So the good thing is if you've written a business plan and it's good, it's good standing, in good shape, and or you've been out pitching investors and you've had to think about this, a lot of these things. And so we can extract and incorporate that thought into the commercialization plan, which makes it easier. But if you haven't, and many haven't, because, you know, a lot of innovation is coming out of, you know, the technical community, and maybe you haven't had the opportunity to start a business before, right? And you're going to need some help. So I you know, implore you to go out and find that help you can find from other mentors, other winners, SBDC, Apex, anybody who can help you, you know, with your commercialization thoughts. I think I touched on this a little bit. Why is it important? It's the economic impact created. It shifts that paradigm again for these research-oriented applications. We get a lot of technology spin-outs from the universities, but they're all research-oriented, super bright people, but they just maybe haven't had that paradigm to have to now really think about this as a business, right? If you're a researcher and you've been, you know, writing proposals, obtaining research grants, there's the commercial component's typically not a component of those research grants. So maybe you just haven't had the ability to shift your thinking. And the other really important thing is it's an important weight in the application scoring, right? When we score these things, depending on the agency, you know, NSF, it tends to weigh pretty heavy, you know, NIH, and then DOD with the dual use. It's important. It's an important aspect. So now I'm just going to give you some common themes about things to think about and what's important when you're writing this commercialization plan. Like, and I'm going to tell you, if you go to NSF, they're going to give you some prompts on how to start to write this plan, what they'd like to see, and especially a phase 1 or a phase 2. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But there is a language. There's a startup language. It's evolved here over the last 10 years, right? We've got all these words. We've got traction. We've got cash flow and churn and freemium models and A/B tests, business model. I mean, all this stuff. So we try to, when we write the plan, we try to replace words in the plan with the vernacular of startups. So that's somebody who has done this before and understands this language. It's good to put it in there. It just makes you appear to be, you know, somewhat educated on the in the startup landscape. So language, important. Another thing is discovery and validation. So we used to call this market research, but now it's kind of different. Now, some folks who are coming out of the universities have gone through I-Corps programs. If you've gone through an I-Corps program, you know what discovery and validation is. They push it pretty heavy. They make you interview 100 clients or so, potential clients, on an interview basis. And what you're trying to do is tease out really some of the requirements of these clients. What typically happens is you've got an idea for a business, you've got a technology, and you start to form a solution to what you think is a problem, but then you get outside the, you know, outside the building, outside of your facility, and you start talking to people outside who actually could have the problem and should have the problem. And what you'll find is if you do enough of those, you will validate the problem and probably change the solution. It's a very eye-opening exercise. So if you've done any of that discovery, we call it and use that word discovery. And this is the, I think this is the telescope up in Flagstaff that discovered Pluto. I forget the name of it, but anyway, we put that we will put that in the commercialization section. It's always something that catches somebody's eye if you've done discovery. Having a team of advisors, a team and advisors, and I'm going to just focus on more of advisors, because if you're doing a phase one, it may be you and somebody else, but and you may want to describe your team and maybe some of the holes, but having a board of advisors is really important. And this doesn't have to be a formal legal contractual obligation sitting on your actual, your board. It can be an informal board of advisors, and people in the domain, people tangential to the domain. Who are you talking to? Who can you go to for advice? And doing this shows one, coachability, but it also shows that you understand that where to go to find additional knowledge should you need it. So very powerful, very important to put in there. Your business model and revenue model. I mean, it sounds pretty simple. I'm gonna give you this, you're gonna give me money. What are you gonna, what is it? Is it a hardware model? Is it a hardware model with a software licensing component? Is it a SaaS model? Software as a service model? What is the business model? And then again, you're early here. You're early, and you may think you may have one business model in mind, and it's okay. You're going to validate that business model as you move through the discovery process and as you move through your startup. But at least early on, have some idea of what you think your model will be. Again, it shows that you're thinking about this as a business, right? Validate the market size. So a couple different ways to do market sizes. You can do a bottoms up, which is essentially do a bottoms up count of customers and apply some revenue to it. And you can come up with a total sales number, and you can estimate the market size. And that's really hard to do unless you're a skilled market researcher. The better thing to do is find some validated third-party market research. Again, I mentioned that we have a couple sources here that are no fee that you can utilize, but discussing the market size and the trajectory, the growth of that market, we call it CAGR. CAGR is the compound annual growth. Is it a growth market? If it's a big market and it's growing, or it's a small market and it's growing, describe the market, the market size. Important. You need to put something in about competition, typically. Knowing what your competition is doing. Now, you're not going to have an exhaustive competitive analysis, although it's, if you cut and paste, it can be pretty easy to do. You think it just looks like text, but realistically, who's doing what you're doing? Competition is not a bad thing. Competition actually can validate your market space, right? If others are interested in similar type of technology and are approaching it maybe some different ways, this kind of validates it. And don't be afraid to talk about that. Important. Okay, so follow on funding. So the SBIR program, STTR program, is not intended to provide all of the funding that you need to commercialize your technology. Phase one will get you off the bench or out of the lab to a proof of concept. If you're lucky enough to get a phase two, that may get you to a prototype, early production kind of model. But there's other things that need to go on with your business, and you'll need to go for additional equity funding. And that's important to acknowledge that. It's important to understand the sources of that funding. I've had clients talk about, I need $5 million and we're going to start with a venture capital firm. And that's typically not the way it works. I mean, if you needed, probably need to tranche it out and need some funding earlier from an angel, from an angel group. Maybe it's 500K, 700K, and then you build off of that. If you could talk about who the angel groups are in your town or who you're going to think about approaching, it all adds just credibility to your story. When I know that I'm going to need additional funding too, I know where these sources of funding are. Doesn't mean you need to get an LOI from an investor to to necessarily secure a phase 1 or a phase 2, although LOIs from investors are helpful. And so here's some different names in the commercialization sections. If DoD calls it commercialization strategy, it's only a page for phase 1. NSF commercial opportunity, it's 2 to 4 pages. It's probably the most robust. DOE has a commercialization plan that's a couple pages, and they'll kind of tell you what they want in it. But you can use my themes commonly to work your text to accommodate what they're asking for. In a phase 2 commercialization plan, I'm going to give you an example in what NSF requires for phase 2. They require pretty hefty commercialization plan. It really starts to look like a business plan at that point, and that's okay. You're asking for $1 million or $1.5 million. If you asked an investor for $1.5 million, you'd have to have a lot of documentation and a lot of knowledge to be able to provide to them. So in this 15-page plan, they're going to ask you for describe the market opportunity. There's some detail there, the company, the team, the product, the technology, really a customer-centric kind of paragraph, as well as the competition. This is where you put in your discovery stuff. And your revenue model and your finance. What's your business model? But now they're gonna ask you for pro formas, which are the business P&Ls for 5 years, which is 2 years during the phase 2, which is typically 2 years or a little bit less, and then 3 years post phase 2. So now we got to do some financial projections. So what do they look like with regard to growth? What do they look like with regard to margin? With regard to overhead costs, etc. So important. And I think I'm done there. I think I want to take some questions, but I think Karen would like to run our poll again because we had several people join late, and it's important to capture some of the data regarding the community college engagement. So Karen, before the questions, you want to run that poll?
Yes, we don't have any questions in the Q&A or the chat, so this may be it, but let me go ahead. This is a separate one. The questions are the same information, but not posted exactly the same, I think. So if you didn't answer the first time, please answer this. If you answered the first time, you do not have to answer this one. And there we go. And I'll give it a second, just to capture anybody, but they may have already left, so. All right. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and end it. And thank you. I appreciate, oh, well, I'll give it just a second. Okay, I'm going to end it. Thank you so much.
Okay, and I'd just like to close. Bob, I'd like to thank you. Jada, I'd like to thank you again for spending the time. Everybody, we're resources. Karen, will you send out the slide decks to everybody?
As soon as I get them, yes.
Okay, good. We'll make sure that happens for you. And yeah, just for SBDC, sign up for services. I know Apex has a portal also to sign up for register for their services, and you can contact Jada as needed. So again, thank you very much. We hope it was informative. We hope to hear from you because we really, if you think you've got a good idea and you want to pursue this, that would be terrific. If you've got a great idea, but you don't think this is for you, still, you can still engage the SBDC. I help folks raise their early stage capital outside of SBIRs all the time. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Bob,
any last words?
No, if you want to get access to our services, please just go to we still are azptac, azptac.com, and, sign up and request an appointment. We'll be happy to help you.
And I'm sorry, Karen, will be an evaluation sent out?
There will.
Okay.
It goes out tomorrow, I believe.
Okay. Look for an evaluation and please tell us how we did. Thank you. Have a good day, everybody.
Yep. Good talking with you, Lou.
Okay. Bye, Jada.